Hello again, and today I am going to be delving into a commentary on why I think everyone should just stop using Apple products and why Apple has just not only fallen off a cliff, but has completely lost its way. So let me start with my history into Apple products. Back when the Macintosh was just a computer, was just a one property around the Apple company. It was in school. I liked the functionality. It was very easy to learn. It was a great stepping stool, I think, for PCs. However, I ended up getting a laptop when I was kind of a young kid, like just turned 10. And it was pretty decent. It was a Macintosh. It was like right around the time that the iPod was coming into fruition. And I liked it because it was super simple to use. I didn't really have to worry about viruses and things like that. And then I upgraded to a Mac Pro like right near the end of high school. And that was my main editing computer. That was my main work computer. I had it for a whole bunch of years through college, and it was able to run old software that certain people found funny at the time. But, I was like, dude, it functions. It's great. Like, what is the point of all this progressing technology if you have to update it every year and pay for new shit? And now we are in that paradigm. And the last Apple laptop that I got was from my dad. It's because he didn't really need it anymore. For some reason, he got it at work, and it had like all the Adobe products and shit, which was crazy to me at the time. But now we are at an impasse, me and Apple, because it's not doing as well as it used to as far as the functionality of the technology. And by the way, all this time I had a bunch of generations of iPhone. The last one I had, I believe, was before the 7. And it was like right before they took out the headphone jack, which is where I was like, I'm not going to continue if this is the case. And funny enough, like last year, my iPhone shorted out and just bit the bullet. And I was so pissed off that I was like only 2 years into that iPhone that I basically said, you know what, fuck this shit. I am not doing this shit anymore. I took a couple months to figure out what kind of phone I wanted, and I ended up settling on this OnePlus 6, which I'm currently using to record this commentary. And it's a great phone, and it still works like I got it yesterday. So, yeah, it goes to show that you do not need Apple to have good products. So let's get into the points of why I think Apple products have just totally declined just in this decade alone. The planned obsolescence of every Apple product is something that I find highly egregious, and this is driven so that you buy the next coming Apple product the year later. This is why, my phone only lasted like 2 years through rigorous use, and it's because they're trying to make you buy the next Apple product. Again, don't ask questions. Just consume product and get excited for next product. It's amazing how that meme just kind of goes into everything. But it's really true when it comes to the Apple products. And, at the end of the day, what happens to the Apple products? They get dumped into a landfill and, continue to be made just so they can get dumped into a landfill, like within 2 years. It's kind of dumb. And this is the way that we are going to have just giant landfills of perfectly decent technology that people just throw away so that they can fucking get the next product. And instead, we should have been focusing on shit like phone blocks, which is a swap out system of parts that you could just take what you need for each kind of situation. And this was a really great idea that Google bought out and then did nothing with it. They basically are sitting on this IP right now. And I have my problems with Google, however, the different video for a different time. The second point in my list is that they are no longer at the top of the market, not only in the apps they design, not only in the actual physical products, But overall, as a company, they may be a $1 trillion company. However, that stock will decline over time once the stockholders realize that Apple doesn't have shit beyond Apple TV Plus. Okay, the big thing that was the case when it came to this was Final Cut Pro. Now, Final Cut Pro was a top-of-the-line software right up until Final Cut Pro 7, which was the Final Cut Pro that I was still working with well into college. And what happened was they made a consumer version of Final Cut Pro called Final Cut Pro 10. It removed a majority of the functionality that made Final Cut Pro a competitor to Avid and Adobe. The editing suite in Adobe that I can't remember the name of right now, that'll come back to me probably in the middle of the commentary. But yeah, Final Cut Pro was at that level. It was that 2 to 3 level. And when Final Cut Pro 10 came out, it basically was like the original iMovie, and iMovie itself was just a disgusting mess by that point. So it really went to show that you're basically paying for $1,000 for a non-professional system, and that's why the industry dumped Final Cut Pro, and here we are today with these inferior Apple products that are now top of the market. Now, speaking of that really expensive iMovie known as Final Cut Pro 10, Apple products are just luxury items. They cost a lot, but they do not have the functionality of certain phones, like even the Samsung Galaxy. The Google Pixel I have seen from my girlfriend, it's pretty good. However, my phone is great because it has a whole bunch of memory, like 256 gigabytes and beyond. The camera is not degraded, even with multiple updates like the iPhone camera does. You can have multiple apps open at once, and it doesn't slow the phone down. However, it does, obviously cripple your battery, but the phone itself retains its functionality, which is amazing. Its processing power is just beyond anything I've ever seen before. And with these luxury items, with these Apple products, they are just a way to say, oh, look at how much money I have. It's basically your new status symbol, is if you own all Apple products. And this is not a path going forward, especially with an economy that could burst at any point because no one is working, or at least in their native country, and they're getting supplanted by foreigners and illegals. Okay, like, you cannot have people buying these luxury items much longer and have it be a sustainable market for Apple products. It will turn niche at a certain point if the economy does a fucking nosedive. So this is something that Apple's not aware of because they just want to sell luxury items. They are just a luxury computer company. And with these luxury items, and specifically the iPhone and the iPad, the computers themselves are losing functionality for a more cosmetic hegemony, similar to what you see on the iPod Touch, the iPhone, and the iPad. So, a computer is set up with a very specific system that can do more than your phone, at least for the moment. But what Apple is doing is taking their computer and making it more like their iPhone. So it's essentially downgrading the computer into a phone with less functionality. And this has been the Apple model, is to make computers really sexy and they have great appeal to a mass audience. But again, it's like, all these people that use the Apple products because initially it was just better for the creative market are now switching over to PC because it's like, there's no point. These are just luxury items. There is nothing here for us if we are just losing processing power and shit like that as a way to appeal to the consumer audience. And so now you will see this flip of PCs being more for a professional audience, and you can build them the way you need to, and you do not have the rigorous specifications that Apple demands. And instead, you will see that the Apple is the basic bitch of computers. And so in conclusion, these Apple products have a finite lifespan. And I believe that Apple as a company itself has a finite lifespan. One of my friends was like, oh, Apple is like the worst company out there. It's like, dude, Google and Disney fucking eclipse that shit. But this is because I think Apple is diminishing in value. I do not think about Apple anymore. I think that Steve Jobs himself was kind of a freak and an idiot, and Wozniak was the guy that had all of the real ideas, and Steve Jobs just kind of built on that. And more importantly, Tim Cook is a guy who kind of genuinely makes me scared of the corporate future, but not as much as like a Sundar Pichai or Susan Wojcicki. I think that in the long run, Tim Cook will be a staple on the footnote of Silicon Valley history. A very small one, of course. And this is because he tends to stay away from the limelight. And when he does, he gets caught saying all this shit about diversity and how we need to censor people who disagree with it and all that crap. And it's very basic to me. Just the entire Apple aesthetic now is incredibly basic. Not in the computing sense, in the aesthetic sense of this is simple, this is not hard to understand. And you are now losing people who are moving into this digital age trying to do better, do more, and it's because you have these rigorous, these boxes that you put yourself in with these Apple products because you cannot customize them and shit like that. And people are now tech savvy enough to realize that the Apple product has a finite lifespan. It has, only a set amount of things it could do. And so now they're building their own rigs. They're building their gaming rigs. They're building their editing rigs. They're building everything. And for some reason, as I close this commentary, I actually didn't get to remember what the Adobe editing software is, which is kind of crazy. But in conclusion, stop buying Apple products. They are not good for you moving forward if you are creative or if you're someone who needs a multifunctional computer. They are going to be, confined to these parameters of builds, and you can't really do anything with them beyond that. And so I say to Apple, if you do not change your ways, if you do not reject Steve Jobs as this false god that he is, and, if you don't embrace what Steve Wozniak was trying to do with the Apple II and saying that this product is still good and that we should still be making stuff like that, we should still be making older products in case people want that, in case people like those design parameters. And if you don't learn to just stop progressing needlessly, well, then you better tread lightly because those sales are going to diminish over time.